What's going on, Packers fans? Aaron Nagler here, joined by Ben Fennell, fresh off our sojourn to Indianapolis, where I did not see you, but I know you were working hard, and now we're on the other side of the combine. How you doing today, Ben?
I'm doing fine. Sitting here, a rainy day at NFL Films. Perfect time to get back in the film room. I think I hear Baldy next door also cranking away in his film lab here. So it's
Nice.
that time of the year. But yeah, missed you out in Indy. And, I used to do the out and about social life thing, but I'm also in a working capacity. I have some early
Yeah,
mornings, some
you're
long
working
days in
hard
the
that week,
truck.
man.
I
Yeah.
think somebody framed it a few years ago on social media. They said it's like that summer camp for NFL media where everyone kind of gets away for their family. They're out late, they're
Right.
drinking. It
Yep.
really is a kind of a social gathering for a lot of the NFL community out there, not only in the media, but scouts and coaches and players, things like that as well.
No
So
doubt.
it's a big kind of get together of the boys, as we like to say. But I have a lot to do, and I've done those late nights and the early mornings, and there's nothing worse than being hungover at work in a
Oh,
truck. So I've learned
no.
my lesson, but I guess thankfully missed you out there because I'm sure it would have been a late hour or something if I did run into you.
Yeah, there were a few late nights, no question about it. But I did want to kind of start there because I think there are undoubtedly people who have no clue what it is you do. Like you are at NFL Films now. We always see your work on Twitter and various places where you do cut ups and things like that. But I saw you posted the selfie with DJ there in the booth for NFL Network. And I had more than a couple people ask, what does Ben do? So why don't you give people a peek behind the curtain as far as not only what your responsibilities are during that week, the combine week, but in general, like you're always talking about in the truck and
Mhm.
doing production work. What's your typical kind of work week during the combine, and what it is that you do during the season?
All right, listen up, mom and dad, because I know they have no clue what I do either. So this is a very common
A
thing
good
in my
idea to
life
like,
of people know I work in
dude.
football and TV, and they couldn't
Trust
actually
me.
explain what I do, and it is a
I've
little
been trying to
confusing on the outside world.
I've been trying to like perfect the elevator pitch, and it's tough. It's
Yeah,
very
it
tough.
doesn't work. So, anyways, in this capacity that I'm working at NFL Films, but for NFL Network, I work on the Senior Bowl, the Combine, the Draft, our off-season entities, where I'm very much in lockstep with our lead draft analyst, Daniel Jeremiah. Wherever he pops up, I try to support him with video needs. So the Combine, we're on the air for nearly 30 hours over 4 days. There's a lot of video needs. So I build all his player breakdowns, anything he wants to talk about, pros and cons, to break down the prospects. I also do some of those drill breakdowns, trying to show how the drills relate to on-field action, which is a little tricky. Some years are better than others. It's something we've been trying to grow. But the combine is a lot of lead up prep. So there's weeks and weeks of banking all that content for the broadcast. When
Right.
I'm finally out there, I'm in the NFL Network production truck, all broadcast, which it is a marathon broadcast for 4 days. It's a long day in the truck. Our call times are 4 hours earlier than you even see us on TV. It's a long day, and you have to be very attentive the whole day because it's an ongoing live broadcast. So there's many players and graphics and information and drills. So when the actual broadcast is going on, my responsibility was to package the tracker highlights after drills. So that was what I was kind of assigned with doing. I have a very good understanding of who the top players are. I have a good understanding of the tracker technology, as it's also something we had used on Thursday Night Football and also used it in the combine last year, but it's growing and growing. So it was my job to quickly assess the drill, who the best players were. Did the tracker work? Was the information correct? Quickly turn it around with my tape operator for a good 3-4 play highlight right after the drill, if the TV world allows for it. Obviously, there's
Right.
commercial breaks, there's other drills coming on, a lot of timing stuff that kind of determines if you get things into TV. We joke about in TV world, you build 100 things, 5 make the air. That's
Yep.
just the nature of TV. So you over prepare and you try to have content for those lulls and those moments if you need it. You don't always need it. So in addition to preparing DJ ahead of time and letting him kind of take all my XOs and breakdowns on the broadcast, I hop into the truck and kind of go through the ebbs and flows of the broadcast. Also talking with DJ throughout the broadcast about, what we're seeing and things like that. Kind of a spotter as well. I know spotting is
Right.
kind of an in-game thing where announcers get help being eyes and ears on the field. So I try to also be a spotter for him as drills are going on and just observational things. So that's kind of the nutshell in the lead up to the combine. The draft is very similar, except we need to load in more and more content and be prepared for potentially 1,000 different players to get drafted.
Right.
Now, the draft is a lot more cushy in my life because I get to be on the stage. I'm just off camera, usually a couple feet away from Rich Eisen, and I
Mhm.
mirror a screen for DJ. So any information that he needs in the course of the broadcast, I call it up on his screen immediately. So in the old days, Mike Mayock would have this big binder on the set, and a
Right.
player would get drafted, and immediately he'd have to flip
Flip
that
it
big
open.
thing, find
Right.
his player, and it just wasn't
Right.
good TV when it got caught. So it was like, you know what? If we could keep them hands off, and it's 2024, let's use some technology, help him with just anything he needs in front. And when you get to the fourth round, you forget who the Cardinals took earlier. You forget what the roster looked like,
Right.
who's still on my board, where are we at
Oh,
here, kind of
man.
thing. So it's a lot of information and just supporting our talent. And that's kind of my life in this world. The scouting side of it and what I do on Twitter is really a personal hobby of mine. I
Right.
love film. I love breaking down players, and it certainly helps my job right now and what I do with DJ and what I had done with Mayock previously. These guys that are on TV as analysts want to work with producers that get the game. And that's always been my niche of someone that understands the game, but I understand TV too. And it's about marrying those for viewers and contents and networks. And it's essentially what I do with my job at Thursday Night Football, my job at CBS, my previous job at the Eagles. It's all producing X's and O's content. And that's kind of the world I live in and the niche I've carved out. So I hope that explained things for my parents that have no idea what I've been doing the last 15 years, but they know I've been going to these games and doing something.
Well, I'm glad I could provide that service for you. So now you can clip this and just send it to your folks. I will say though, I did take note during this past combine where the thing you're talking about as far as preparing packages, right? We did that back in like 2013 when we did our first live entire all 7 round draft show back at Bleacher Report. And I'll never forget how impossibly difficult it was to make sure you found the footage that would reinforce your scouting points, right? And the fact that DJ can go on air and talk about a player's skill set or what they do well, and you guys have married in like just it's not always perfect, but essentially stuff that really reinforces what he's talking about almost every single clip. That is incredibly difficult to do, and you guys make it look completely seamless.
Yeah, it's a team, it's an operation. We have a really good continuity and chemistry working together over the last 6, 7 drafts. So we're kind of an extension of each other's mind. And just these having the continuity on these types of unique events is really important because we have a
Right.
lot of new people. And then after 4 days, they kind of look around like, okay, I kind of get it. I get this. Well, we'll see you next year,
Yeah, exactly.
kind
No,
of
we've
thing.
just hit a
So
groove, and now we're done.
but DJ
Yeah.
is outstanding. Obviously, the scouting background just makes it really seamless to talk about these players, but to be able to fill the airwaves for essentially 30 hours of 4 days and the 3-day draft broadcasts, it's a lot. So
Oh, yeah.
kudos to him, to Rich, our producers, all the in-booth guests, all those things that kind of fill the hours, in the broadcast. It's definitely a really strong team. I hope we could keep it going. There's a lot of unpredictability with the future of this broadcast and this event.
No
So
doubt.
I'm hoping we're catering to the fans as far as what they want to see and trying to grow each year too, which I'm really happy with how the tracker and the miles per hour and all that correlation has really been received over the past few days.
Yeah, man, it's fascinating stuff, and it's just excellent content for any football junkie. That is for damn sure. And with that said, let's flip the page to our Packers community and the Packers junkies out there. As far as looking at the combine and some of the testing results, and certainly you would think there are a few guys who were getting some buzz leading into the combine area, and then now have probably kind of taken themselves out of the running, so to speak, when it comes to possibly ending up in Green Bay. There have been a few corners. There have been, I think, some defensive linemen. There are guys who've kind of probably maybe risen up some boards as far as opening some eyes in Indy. But let's start with a 30,000 foot view here. Was there anyone or anybody positionally that you looked at and thought, okay, this is not what I was expecting? Because a lot of times you'll see or hear from scouts who talk about like, oh, he's going to run really well in Indy, or oh, he's gonna blow up this 3 cone or whatever. There's an expectation for some guys. Was there anybody like throughout the process that kind of surprised you in Indy, in either a good or a bad way?
Well, it's funny because we hit this point every cycle in that combine, the pro day circuit. And this is a funny world we live in that the Bruce Feldman freak list Well, this
Yeah,
is where the
right.
rubber hits the pavement, guys. And I got
Mhm.
news for you. Not every testing metric was accurate and was going to happen. So a lot of that hype kind of builds from the summer, and you get kind of word that someone's going to be a freak, and you kind of get excited to see it, and then they don't, and you're like, what was that? So there's a
Right.
couple guys like that. I don't know if there's some headliners I wanted to absolutely bury. I expected a
Mhm.
Chris Braswell out of Alabama to be a little more explosive, a guy that was reported to jump 38 inches, jump 33. So to jump, half a foot less is disappointing. Everyone was expecting the BYU tackle, Kingsley Suamatatia, to test like a freak somewhere between Penei Sewell and Tristan Wirfs.
Mhm.
That really did not happen by today's standards of freak. He did run 504 at over 320 pounds. Very impressive. But we heard rumblings of high 4.7s, 4.8s, like Trent Williams type of numbers, which just didn't happen. So, those are popping up here and there. But as far as the positive side of things and guys that did hit those marks, I mean, the headliner's Quinion Mitchell out of Toledo, who in the summer was going to bench 225 over 20 times and run in the 4.3s. 14 guys in the history of the combine have ever done that. 4.3 player and bench 20 reps. That means you're strong and holy hell fast.
You can
14 at
fly,
any
right?
position. Any position in the last 20 years of the combine, he hit both those over the weekend. So there were a lot of boxes checked as well on those workouts, but a couple, leave you a little disappointed. It happens every year.
What do you make of athletic testing as far as we know that the combine, or I think people kind of should know that the combine is essentially information gathering, right? We always talk about the importance of the medical and the interview. The on-field stuff is certainly, broadcast and the fans eat it up. And sometimes you hear the derisive, kind of underwear Olympic stuff, but it's just information gathering, right? And I've been talking to Packers fans online, all kind of throughout the offseason, but certainly during the combine and kind of in the wake of it, where it feels like you see somebody like Devondre Sweat, right? A player who certainly can play ball and is certainly a certain type of player, but you look at his athletic threshold and his athletic testing coming out of the combine, that's someone traditionally who the Packers would probably not even have on their board. But I can understand how fans might get frustrated with this idea that I can watch a guy play on Saturdays and try to project him to a Sunday kind of position where it sure looks like the man knows how to play the game of football. Why is this athletic testing and kind of these numbers that they take off of, their output in Indy, why is that important? Like, why do the Packers in particular have such an affinity for, okay, we're going to make sure that these guys are in this, high percentile when it comes to the athletes that we're drafting, regardless of positions. These are, the testing metrics that we have got to have.
And as much as you want to watch them play football first and foremost, and your film is your football DNA, it's who you are as a player on the field between the lines. That is so much different for every player. Your situation, what you're asked to do, your role, the scheme, the talent ability around you, the talent ability you're going against. So I think the big name in the game of these prospects is trying to find a streamlined way to evaluate them across different entities. Yes, they are all linebackers, but they are playing different positions essentially within their schemes. These testings just give the NFL scouts, fans a more baseline way to compare two players at the same position, doing the same thing in the same setting. So I think it really helps alleviate, clumps of players on your board where you may have a tie or you see somebody similar who has a higher end traits or has higher end athletic ability to also contribute to your team, or maybe to see them in a role that they weren't able to showcase on the field on Saturdays. And I think everyone can go to the, excuse me, like the polar examples of being a big, tall, sexy, explosive receiver playing for Air Force in the triple option.
Right.
So it's
Right.
situations
Right.
like that. Obviously, that's a pretty extreme, but it's a good
Mhm.
snapshot of just, oh, well, your situation can really reflect who you are as a player, and it may not be accurate. So I think these testings just give a more streamlined baseline association to each other. Now, whether that determines are you a good football player or not completely different conversation. But it's just comparative analysis of different players doing the same thing. And yes, you can get excited about athletic scores and big, large humans doing impressive athletic things. It is impressive to watch. And, I think we should take note of it when somebody does something very freaky and then try to translate that to the field. Is that something you had seen? Is that something you can do later on? And it's all pieces of this giant puzzle that is not an exact science. So as much as you can evaluate every Hall of Famer out there and say, this is the height, weight, speed, length, everything, the situation. Well, there's still going to be some outliers. There's still going to be some in-betweens, and there are going to be those people that don't fit exactly that you have to evaluate. So there's no perfect formula to this, no perfect science to it. It's all pieces of the puzzle, like you had said, acquiring information. And if they want to give us more info, like testing, we'll take it back to the lab and see what we could do with it.
Taking off your analyst hat for a second, right? Like, you are an excellent scout. You do great work, especially when it comes to kind of explaining what you're looking at to a general audience, right? Which is, I think, one of the hardest things to do with the game of football. I remember talking to Matt Bowen about this 10 years ago regarding like communicating to a mass audience, right? You do that extremely well. But I want you to kind of put that aside for a moment. You're wearing your Packers gear right now. I want you to give me your thoughts as a Packers fan coming out of that combine. Was there anybody that jumped at you and you thought, I really want to see this guy's name get called late April when the Packers are on the clock? Was there someone or a couple guys even that you thought, oh, this guy's like kind of maybe not becoming your Packers draft crush, but somebody who you'd really like to see in the green and gold?
Well, there are just some absolute specimens at offensive line. And I always want to keep adding to the trenches. And I think we're excited about this offensive line class, and it's becoming a bit of a trend to be excited about offensive linemen. But don't assume these guys come around every year. And there are some
Right.
just real freaks this year, whether it's, Fontano out of Washington, Fuaga out of Oregon State, Joe Alt at 6'8", 320 at Notre Dame. I would just love a high-level offensive line specimen to the Green Bay Packers, which, I mean, outside of Brian Bulaga, I don't know the last time they aimed for somebody like that in the draft. So I just feel like the offensive line cures so many problems, keeps your quarterback upright, lets the receivers get down the field, establishes the run game. You build that nasty personality. I love getting the high-level offensive linemen. This draft has so many of them. Even if you want to go to the Maulers, J.C. Latham, man, the best thing he did all weekend was just breathe and be alive. That guy is a freak show human being. He is massive. Man, he looks the part out there. Same with Amarius Mims, just showing up was enough. It was like, wow, that's a box checked right there. So there's guys on the O-line I'm really kind of salivating for. And this is, we could go 6-7 deep and not mention Graham Bartons of the world, Zach Frazier's of the world, Jackson Powers Johnson's of the world. It's like 10 offensive linemen that could go in the first round this year. And I don't know if any are going to end up in Green Bay. And that kind of just puts a little kind of knife twist into my side there, just to say I would love somebody to end up
Right.
in green and gold.
Well, it's interesting. The Barton one is really interesting to me. That's someone who, coming off the combine, has created, I think, a bit of buzz, right? And I do suspect that he would be on the Packers board. I think 25 might be a bit rich, actually. I love the idea of him on day two, early day two, but I don't care if the player is good and you can set it and forget it. I'm all in on this idea of, let's get high end athletic quality play at the tackle position for the next 10 years, hopefully, right? This is something that always seems to come up, though. And this came up last week when I was talking with Billy on the air. Fans have this automatic pushback of, oh, well, they've been so successful on day three. Why, quote, waste the selection on day one or early in the draft? And I'm like, I'm with you. Let's get a stud. Let's go out there and like absolutely dominate up front. Because to your point, not only can you erase a lot of other stuff, you can dictate up front if you've got an elite athlete at tackle or anywhere across your offensive line. But I understand that they've been very successful on day three, but there ain't no shame in the game of taking an elite prospect and just absolutely dominating up front.
And like I had said a few weeks ago, the Packers do have a track record of success on day three, particularly in the O-line. But no team, including the Packers, goes into the draft expecting to find starters on day 3.
Right.
You kind of bank on high level traits, you bank on some under the radar guys, maybe overdraft someone that could have been a 7th rounder you really liked in the 5th, and you hope for the best, but you don't go in expecting it. And I think the second you do, you are on a path of disaster. So I think it's great you found Zach Tom, Bakhtiari, wherever the hell they found TJ Lang sitting, guys from the previous era.
Right.
I think they were day 3ers, but I
Mhm.
still think the type of player you get early on is a irreplaceable type of talent, and you just doesn't come around later in the draft. Certainly, Bakhtiari is an outlier. It's great they found that. Just doesn't happen every year. And I'll actually push back on you just a little bit with the Graham Barton, because
Mhm.
I don't think he had much buzz coming out of the combine. He didn't work out,
With
didn't
Packers
perform at the
fans is
senior.
my
Oh
is
yeah,
my thing. Like,
didn't
that's
perform at
but
the
I hear
Senior
what you're
Bowl.
saying.
Aaron, I
Yeah.
actually kind of think he could be one of the more under the radar sleeper elite players in this draft. That's kind of flirting under the headlines because of all that. But he is a really good player. I think Lewis
Mhm.
Riddick just tweeted last night his love for him as well. So go find that tweet. He is
Mhm.
a top player in this draft. Just maybe doesn't have the headlines, the buzz, because he really hasn't gotten a chance to show it, other than just measuring in and being the part of 6'5", 310, and there's some versatility in his positions. But
Well, and that's it. That's the key, right? The versatility, and I think that's
yeah,
at this point, I think Packers fans are kinda conditioned where it's like, "Oh, he's versatile. He can play up and down the line. Instant Packer." Right?
yeah,
Because, like, that's how
Packers
they've
fans love that.
operated.
Yeah,
That's how they've operated, you know? Ben, I cannot thank you enough for the time, man. Really appreciate your insights. Really appreciate you jumping on and talking combine Packers with me each and every week. Really appreciate it. Talk to you soon, man.
see Aaron.